What's up, QAA listeners?
The fun games have begun.
I found a way to connect to the internet. I'm sorry, boy.
Welcome, listener, to chapter 176 of the QAnon Anonymous podcast, the QAnon International Germany episode. As always, we are your hosts, Jake Rockatansky,
Julian Field,
and Travis View.
This week, we resume our ongoing series on countries that have, for one reason or another, taken a liking to QAnon in the last 4 years. Now, I'll admit that there is one specific country I had hoped might escape the international spread of our favorite conspiracy theory, and that country is Germany. But hey, Pobody's nerfect, or as the Germans would say, Wiemand ist nullkommen. To be as thorough as possible, our guest this week is Miro Dittrich, researcher and founder of CEMAS, an organization monitoring far-right movements and conspiracy theories in Germany. But before we speak to him, Travis has kindly prepared a segment detailing the rise of QAnon in Germany, which involves sovereign citizens, NATO military exercises, and, of course, a 90s R&B singer who filmed himself weeping about children being harvested for adrenochrome. Willkommen, meine Freunden!
Yes, this is. I'm glad to get back into it. Doing our around-the-world journey of QAnon. Now, if you'll remember, the very first time we did this, we took a look at the Netherlands. But today, we're looking at basically the number one country for the non-Anglosphere, which is Germany.
Oh, you're just rating countries now?
Well, I mean for QAnon, I mean, it's like outside.
Okay.
It's like, yeah.
I thought you were just making a case for German supremacy.
In terms of popularity,
okay,
Germany is number one outside of non-English speaking countries.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm obviously not very familiar with like the culture of politics or Germany. So to assist with research for this episode, I consulted with W.F. Thomas, who is a researcher who studies extremism, political movements, and conspiracy narratives. Thomas is an American who spent about a year living in Germany, is fluent in German, and has done a lot of research on QAnon in that country. I mean, I remember when I first started looking at QAnon in 2018, I noticed that the very first foreign language threads on the Q Research board on 8chan were in German. And this concerned me a little bit because it's like, oh my gosh, here's the thing spreading internationally. It's not just an American thing anymore. And also because, it's based upon my understanding, like Germany is supposed to be the model for centrist democracy now. Like as part of like Germany's legacy of denazification, Germany even has like really harsh laws that prohibit advocating for extremist ideologies.
Yes, we sold it to you as centrism, my friend, but it was always a lie.
So apparently the German penal code prohibits publicly denying the Holocaust, disseminating Nazi propaganda, and this includes sharing images such as swastikas, wearing an SS uniform, and making statements in support of Hitler. So
I like the idea that it's publicly so that people can still like mutter it under their breath while they're pissing.
Listen, if you go in your home, close the curtains, put on your ESS uniform, do a few Roman salutes, that's fine. But do out in public, apparently you can get in trouble.
Yeah, and not just with the law. I have a friend who served in the Berlin Brigade during the Cold War, and he's got this incredible story. He was riding on a bus with a couple other soldiers, and like one of the hillbilly soldiers he was with, just as a joke, started singing like some like Nazi hymn or something like that. And my buddy said that 3 old guys, like in their 70s and 80s, got up from the back of the bus and started beating the shit out of the guy. Just fucking wailing on him.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how free speech works, too. Like, you can say your bit, but
Right.
nobody's saying that 3 old guys won't beat the shit out of you.
Yeah, if you say something really shitty, you might find a fucking fist in your mouth.
Remember, after Trump was elected and the world community had their initial shock and freak out over that upsetting election, some suggested that that German leader Angela Merkel should be named the new leader of the free world.
Ugh.
And
My God.
Also remember in QAnon narratives, Angela Merkel is much, much hated, suspected of being Hitler's daughter. This is what they
That
said.
That is such a cheap one. Like, my God, if like you're that, I mean, there's just no, it's like the first thing that like a 2-year-old would think of. She's literally Hitler's daughter, you know that? What the fuck? Well, if you look at what the Germans did to the Greek with the kind of monetary system and the financial system, they have better tools than they did back in the day, if you know what I'm saying. They don't need to do this kind of stuff. This is uncomfortable for Merkel. She's like, listen, we are dominating. It's just in a new way.
Now, before the pandemic, QAnon, there was a presence of QAnon in Germany, but it was very, very limited. One of the original QAnon promoters in that country is a former financial journalist named Oliver Janik. I guess he's kind of like the Liz Crokin of German QAnon in that they both worked for fairly mainstream publications before they lost their shit and became total conspiracists. Janik has lived in the Philippines since 2015, and I know what you're thinking. There's not any evidence that he was in contact with Jim or Ron Watkins. So I learned that there's actually a tendency of German far-right nationalists to flee the country. Famously, in previous generations, a favorite destination was Argentina. But more recently, German extremist video blogger named Nikolai Nerling announced his intention to stay in the country of Brazil in order to avoid prosecution. Another German who described himself as ultra-right wing, quite accurately, is the vegan cookbook author Attila Hildmann.
Okay, well, that name is over the top.
So Hildmann became a QAnon influencer, then became an outright neo-Nazi before finally disavowing QAnon as a Jewish conspiracy. So if you start going far right, you enter QAnon land, but if you keep going, you go past QAnon world and you just see Jews everywhere. You can't see QAnon anymore. You start seeing that QAnon was actually a Jewish conspiracy, because everything is if you're that far right.
Traded my Qs for my Jews.
Hildmann wound up fleeing Germany for Turkey as he faced legal prosecution for incitement and Holocaust denial. In fact, German conspiracists fleeing Germany is such a popular trend that some have started a little settlement in Paraguay called El Paraíso Verde. So this is from that colony's website.
El Paraíso Verde was started in 2016 with the dream of a better life and future outside of the quote-unquote matrix, the socialist trends of current economic and political situations worldwide, as well as the global spread of degenerative implementations such as 5G, chemtrails, fluoridated water, mandatory vaccinations, and healthcare mandates were our catalyst to seek a new frontier of possibilities. Hey, is this like a crypto land thing? Or it might as well be. We were guided to our paraíso so our vision could have room to flourish. We have found the place where we can live in our state of truth and lift the constructed veil perpetuated by the mainstream media and most societies. With over 6 square miles of land, clean air, and pure water, El Paraíso Verde is set for a green, sustainable way of life. Our green paradise has become a refuge for quote-unquote conservative free thinkers, for nonconformists, and for those looking to live their best life on their terms. It's incredible now that, Nazism is indistinguishable from a company selling you its lifestyle on their website. Like, everyone's looking to live their best life. Show up as your best self in the moment.
You know what? It is funny. They actually have a YouTube page too, and it looks like a YouTube page for an all-inclusive resort in the Bahamas, where you have Germans talking about oh yes, I came here and I am much happier. It is much more peaceful. I have a house here, and sometimes the water isn't always warm, but I can get that fixed. But they're selling a lifestyle. You're right.
And they're really playing with the word paraíso, which is just paradise. They're really saying we were guided to our paradise. This is the promised land for the chosen people, as in people too anti-Semitic to not be anti-Semitic in public.
So this colony was started by a couple named Sylvia and Erwin Anno, and on their About page it states, quote, "We are not gurus and we are not cult leaders. We firmly reject that." And I gotta say, my suspicion that they're cult leaders only rose when I said that. Also, when I saw their couple photo in which they are wearing matching black pants and button-up shirt. And when you're matching clothes and you start a colony in South America and you insist that you're not a cult leader, I don't know. Doesn't sound great.
Yeah, but they just look like 22-year-olds going bowling or something. This is the strangest. They are truly uncanny. They look like They look very healthy, which is funny because, of course, eco-fascism is now like completely integrated into Nazism and shit. And they're probably new age too. Like they probably could talk to you about chakras as well.
I bet their diet is amazing.
Are they both wearing "Hello, my name is" stickers? Because that's sus.
No, that's like their paradise. It says Paraíso on it, so it's like their little.
It's like their branded cult shirts, kind
It's
of.
like, remember when Adam and Eve were in paradise? They had the word paradise written on their chests.
Right. And Adam and Eve in messy Pinterest cursive stitched into the backs.
Oh, fuck.
Wow.
Now, while the QAnon promoting ex-journalist Oliver Yannick was in the Philippines, he hopped on the Q train very early. In 2017, he made a video titled, "Who is Q? Trump's Secret Agent?" And it received over 90,000 views.
Nice.
Oliver Yannick also shared a German translation of Joe M's Plan to Save the World video, which, itself may be responsible for red-pilling more people into QAnon than any other, QAnon video propaganda.
Oh, yeah.
Now, the situation is pretty funny because here we have like a German in the Philippines promoting an American conspiracy theory through a video that was possibly produced by a South African. Many people suspect Joe M of being South African. He has been doxxed, so we don't know for sure. And this has all been done to fight against the evils of globalism. For years, the largest QAnon network in Germany has been called Global Change. That's just Global Change with a Q where a G is supposed to be. And they have a YouTube channel, Telegram, Facebook, at least before they, got banned. But it was sort of like the biggest German QAnon one-stop shop for all your baking needs. However, these efforts to promote QAnon as a sort of distinct movement didn't prove to be very successful in Germany as it was here in the United States. In Germany, QAnon didn't find much success until it started grafting onto existing extremist movements. Now, one of the movements that took a liking to QAnon in Germany is the Reichsbürger movement, or the Reich Citizens movement. This is like the German sovereign citizens. These are people who believe that the German state, as most people conceive of it, is really an administrative construct of Western powers, and therefore they reject the legitimacy of the Federal Republic of Germany and its governmental authorities.
Well, to be clear, the German state is part of the EU, which is essentially an administrative construct of Western powers. It's pretty funny because that side is good, and then they're like, and therefore the legitimacy of the Federal Republic of Germany. It's just fuck it. I'm throwing it all in the garbage.
No, I mean, it's like, it's the same thing with sovereign citizens who believe that the United States doesn't exist, basically. And it stopped being a country in 1871. And it's actually this fictional corporation, and it's not real. And if you say the magic words, then all of a sudden you can sort of revert back to the old times. You enter into a time machine, everything's better again.
Yeah, this is a good way for people to take aim at, the corporations without really doing anything.
So the Reichsbürgers, they unite around the idea that the German Empire's 1871 borders are still legitimate. They also like the year 1871. Maybe that's a coincidence. Like the sovereign citizens, they refuse to pay taxes, and they try to advance their cause with frivolous lawsuits. The Reichsbürger scene began to develop in the 1980s, and apparently it's not that popular. It has about 19,000 supporters, according to German intelligence officials. Several splinter groups, they take it even further by moving from disobedience to creating their own sort of parallel competing pseudo-state. For instance, there's one man named Alexander Scholwach who proclaimed himself the head of the legitimate government in exile of the German Reich. And his supporters say that they only adhere to the laws from the now defunct German regime. They also issue a Reich Pass, which is an alternative passport for this alternative conception of the German state, which is, fun. It's like, it's getting like a passport from Disneyland or something. Also, like the sovereign citizens in the U.S., they are a big fan of stockpiling guns, though it is harder to do in Germany than here in the U.S. German authorities have occasionally attempted to do raids on Reichsbürger members who have allegedly stockpiling guns, which has led to shootouts. One of the group's members, who is a former Mr. Germany beauty pageant winner named Adrian Ursake, he was convicted for attempted murder after starting a shootout with police in 2016. And I gotta say, I don't know. Very strange to be literally Mr. Mr. Germany and then say the German state isn't real. What are you representing then, Mr. Germany?
Yeah, imagining this guy coming out of his house with like some sort of assault rifle feels like a C-tier, like wannabe Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It's like Terminatrix, like one of those kind of like fake movies that like you see like way, way, way at the bottom of Netflix.
These days, I'm not feeling like Mr. Germany. I'm kind of feeling like Mr. One World Government. I think it's time to do something.
And the sash she's wearing in this picture says Space Dream. Interesting.
That's what I would describe him as. Yeah, he's a snack.
Another member of the Reichsbürger movement named Wolfgang P. in media reports was sentenced to life in prison for murdering a police officer in 2017. The man used an automatic rifle to open fire on security forces when they raided his home in search of weapons that he had stockpiled.
Wolfgang P. Skirt?
Holy shit.
Yeah, it gets serious. So apparently people in the Reichsbürger movement identify themselves by flying the flag of the old German Empire, though evidently this can get confusing because out-and-out neo-Nazis also fly this flag because they could face legal consequences for displaying the swastika.
Yeah.
The popularity of QAnon in Germany accelerated due to the coronavirus, as it did here in the US. The combination of global upheaval, economic downturn, and government-mandated lockdowns turned people who are maybe kind of conspiratorial into full-on QAnon believers. In 2020, the German publication Der Spiegel interviewed one 58-year-old woman who was radicalized as a consequence of the pandemic.
Ellen Colwade-Borsch is an alternative psychotherapy practitioner. She explains that in her office, she tries to help patients, quote, integrate feelings and shadow aspects, and says that business was going great until the pandemic. Quote, that knocked me off my feet. Her income dwindled along with her happiness. She asked herself, quote, why are people creating such terror worldwide? Because of a virus that is proven to not do what people have claimed it does? Colwade-Borsch says that as soon as something seems strange to her and the facts don't add up, quote, I immediately start digging. With this corona story, I say, okay, I'll give you until Easter. By then, I will have found out what's going on. She says that she was willing to, quote, keep quiet until then. That's over now. Now she no longer wants to allow a supposed elite directed by the World Health Organization to destroy her life. She believes this elite wants to establish a, quote, new world order and oppress citizens. Quote, at first they tried it through the climate. Now they're trying it through corona. She believes a small group is getting richer through the pandemic. Quote, and then we get into the deep state. She believes it's possible that a youth-giving elixir is being created from the blood of children, as QAnon claims. She said that her transformation happened, quote, bit by bit. At first, there was her skepticism of conventional medicine. She says she met people at the Buddhist center that, quote, thought differently. She dove deeply into naturopathic medicine, tried urine therapy, and became skeptical of vaccines. She is worried, she says, that a genetic vaccine against COVID-19 could turn people into cyborgs.
Yep. By the way, urine therapy is just drinking your own piss. It's not like a fucking method of...
Yeah, it's not like getting put under hypnosis and thinking about all the times you peed.
A lot of people do it, though, incredibly, at least in these kind of scenes.
She jumps up and disappears into the house. When she returns to the patio, she has a walnut-sized yellow clump in her hand. Inorganic sulfur. She bites into it. Quote, it helps heal the gut, she says. She says that QAnon is about being a, quote, sovereign human being. She argues that the truly dangerous terrorism organization is Antifa, something she heard on the X-22 report. And, she says, someone else in the movement told her that the coronavirus will stop once Trump is reelected.
Yeah, X-22 is like old, probably longest standing.
Yeah, X-22 report. That's one of the, I think they started out with like trying to claim there's an imminent financial collapse, but they got deep into QAnon stuff, so... It's worth noting that the far right in Germany just generally exploited the pandemic as a way to push their agenda. For example, the German far right party, which is the AfD, or the Alternative for Germany. AfD began as a response to the anger and fear that some Germans felt when their currency, the Deutsche Mark, was subsumed by the euro. It grew in popularity as it shifted its attention to immigration and peaked when it attacked German Chancellor Angela Merkel's decision to allow a record number of asylum seekers into Germany. In fact, it became the third largest party in the country and the de facto opposition party to the coalition centrist government. But then, as the number of refugees entering Germany subsided and the resettlement proved to be largely successful, AfD instead exploited fears about, the pandemic and its response. In one poll, 24% of AfD supporters stated that the corona pandemic is a conspiracy to oppress people, and an additional 41% consider that statement to be likely. So, this is an interesting thing where, these natural phenomenons, which affect everyone, like this worldwide virus or, the changing climate, which is just forces that are just happening, are considered to be like part of a nefarious conspiracy to exert control.
Right, because, it's exactly like you said. These are things that the ordinary citizen can't control. It's out of their control. It has nothing to do with them. There's nothing that they can really do. And so it's much easier to assign it, this sort of nefarious sort of plot, because then it's something that you can vote out or protest against, something to fight back against.
Now, on social media, there were AfD and QAnon hashtags pushed together to suggesting that AfD supporters and QAnon supporters, that there's a lot of overlap there, or that AfD supporters were using passion around QAnon in order to support their cause. But QAnon proved to be an unreliable partner for that political party. A report for the Institute for Strategic Dialogue talks about one instance during a Bavarian election in 2018 where German QAnon members were split on how to vote. Some recommended voting for AfD, while others wanted to give up on electoral politics entirely. Here's from that report.
A rift emerged among members of the QAnon conspiracy theory communities on Discord and 4chan. While some members recommended voting for AfD, others tried to push for a no vote. One user wrote, "The elections are invalid since 1956. If you want something new, you should not vote, and AfD are the Trojan horse." And, quote, "The voters are the idiots. They support the system."
Another event that really helped to light the fuse for QAnon in Germany was a NATO military exercise called Defender Europe 20. So in this exercise, the U.S. planned to send tens of thousands of troops to Europe in May of 2020. And it was the biggest military exercise on European soil in decades. It was supposed to underscore Washington's commitment to NATO. The purpose was to test the ability of the United States to transport their soldiers across the Atlantic to Belgium and the Netherlands, and then move quickly east through Germany into Poland along NATO's eastern flank. So basically, if World War III breaks out, how quickly could the U.S. get their troops in position is the basic purpose of this exercise.
No, this makes perfect sense. NATO was designed to fight communism in the USSR, which is obviously a huge force still. So doing big, aggressive cross-continent exercises is just normal because we are the good guys, and there's these bad communists out there. Obviously, you can see how China and Russia are just communist strongholds right now. The Bolsheviks are in charge there. So, no, this is all good and smart, actually. It's part of a normal tactical way of thinking. NATO's eastern flank. A fucking coalition of countries created to defeat something that was dissolved in the fucking 90s. Sorry.
Now, that's one objection to these kinds of exercises, but conspiracists had a different one.
Of course.
They
and also, by the way, thank God.
The funny thing is that, they actually weren't objecting to it at all. They actually became convinced that the secret purpose of this military exercise was to conduct raids on deep underground military bases, or DUMBs. Of course, these were supposedly a way to free all of the many children who are being sex trafficked by the cabal in these entirely fictional, not real underground bases.
I thought at least it would be like an Alex Jones style FEMA camp thing where they think that NATO is like the UN, even though NATO is way more able to act militarily on the international scene. But I love this. This is no, NATO are the good guys, which is very rare in conspiracy theories or in anything to have a big, and they're actually going to liberate the mole children. In the Ukraine, we have mole children. That's how you can really wage war. We need not just to claim they're doing false flags. America should straight up say we're going to rescue the mole children under Kharkiv airport. We're going there right now. We're sending SAMs. We're sending all kinds of different new bombs we've invented because we will save the mole children.
SAM is a surface-to-air missile, so I mean, this would probably be, something different, unless the children are being flown through the air, which is
no, because the Cabal will try to
possible.
defend their deep underground military bases by using drones, SAMs are very useful against drones.
No, but I remember when this was a really big thing in QAnon, very, very early on, where any footage of any sort of military training exercise was explained as like, oh, it's an undercover operation. I remember there was one in Los Angeles, I think, where they thought that somebody was being like extracted from a hotel or something like that. This was big. If you're lucky enough to capture any kind of military training exercise on videotape, I mean, that's good conspiracy currency.
Yeah, remember when Obama freaked everybody out by running like super specific like secret ops in Michigan, basically, like after they had a water crisis, and they fucking freaked out because it was like total, like no one knew they were happening, and then suddenly there were helicopters, multiple squads like going into buildings and stuff, and apparently they had like greenlit these military exercises, which is just so fun for the population to just be like randomly traumatized when you're like, are we being invaded?
It is fun. I was actually I was driving down to Palm Springs this past weekend, and I saw this like big plane, and I turned to my partner and I was like, "Oh, I think that's like look at that military cargo plane." And she was like, it's not. It's flying so close to us. That's a small plane. It's a small plane." I was like, "No." I was like, "I think that's a big plane that's far away." And so it looks like it's close to us because it's so big. And we agreed to disagree. And then like literally 5 minutes later, I saw 2 F-35 jets like streak through the air, like doing, some Top Gun shit. And it was fucking awesome. I didn't think that there was any sort of, ulterior sort of reasoning for this. I just assumed that they were running training exercises. But I thought it was awesome. I've never seen a fighter jet like out in broad daylight. Like that was a new experience for me. I loved it. I'm for this. And
we now know that when the time comes, Jake will go with a smile.
I will.
It's
You know what?
I've
done a lot of fucking work getting to that point. I mean, I'm the kind of person that is genetically disposed to be afraid of moles. And I'm not talking about mole children or the animals, but moles on my body. And so to get to a point where I'm okay with whatever impending doom is on the horizon, that's good. That's a lot of hard work, and I'm happy to be here.
Congrats, Jake.
Thanks.
So I'm going to play a video talking about the conspiracy theory that this NATO exercise was really a sort of a child rescue operation, and it was really popular on Facebook. And in the video, you may recognize the voice of a conspiracist, New Age UFO influencer David Wilcock.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, apparently there's a big theosophy scene in Germany. They're into that stuff. And obviously German new medicine came out of there.
In March 2020, the United States deployed 30,000 troops to Europe to assist with the excavation of DUMBs, also known as deep underground military bases. This was actioned to free child-trafficked children and arrest deep state cabal members.
The U.S. has already sent 30,000 troops to Europe, where most of these guys running the Illuminati live in their strongholds. Here is one of several headlines you could read about this. Dated March 15th, 30,000 American troops arrive in Europe amidst the COVID-19 crisis.
It is kind of tragic for people whose theories rely on this, that they have to say the word dumb every time they make a claim.
So apparently the paranoia around this particular military exercise led to a kind of marriage between QAnon and the Reichsbürgers online. And on March 5th, 2020, the elements of the QAnon, the Reichsbürgers, fused into a common Facebook group. It was followed later by a Telegram channel. So like in the US, QAnon in Germany also got a boost thanks to aging celebrities. In the US, of course, early QAnon boosters included the comedian Roseanne Barr and baseball player Kurt Schilling. But in Germany, one of the earliest Q-pilled celebrities is the R&B singer Xavier Naidoo. So he has enjoyed a long recording career starting in the 90s, and he has even managed to get singles charted as recently as 2019, so still very active.
Yeah.
Yo, jugglers!
nur vorüberziehen. Es gibt Menschen, die lange bei dir sind. Du brauchst Feingefühl, um sie zu verstehen. Manche sind zu kühl und wollen niemand sehen. Andere wiederum sind in den Niederungen. Vielleicht hilfst du ihnen, wieder aufzustehen. Und ich danke allen Menschen, die mich zu dem machten, der ich bin.
It's a very classy music video, I gotta say.
Yes, yeah, well shot. But unfortunately, he is a major voice for QAnon in Germany.
Cool.
Which is apparently was unsurprising. I've been told that that controversy sort of followed him for years. For example, he promoted the anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that German history of the 20th century can be blamed on the Rothschild family. He also once spoke at a meeting for the Reichsbürger movement. These views became a problem when it was announced that he would represent Germany for the Eurovision Song Contest in 2016, and he wound up actually not doing that because of this. So he's always been kind of controversial. In March of 2020, Xavier Naidoo published a video of himself weeping about the children who supposedly were being enslaved and tortured for their adrenochrome.
Kinder aus den Händen pädophile Netzwerke befreit. Aber nicht so wie ihr denkt. Nicht das Pädophil, was mir meint. Adrenochrome.
Man, it is heartbreaking always to see these guys break down because they are having a true emotional moment. You know, it really isn't faked, and it's just like,
No.
what do you tell someone who's having an emotional breakdown because they think that adrenochrome is being harvested?
No, it is like, you know, it's like, yeah, I'm not doubting the sincerity of their emotional experience anymore. I would doubt the sincerity of the emotional experience of a child who just watched the Never-Ending Story for the first time.
I cried at the end of White Fang in the movie theater.
I was pretty scared by that. I probably cried too, yeah.
But the problem is that this is an adult, a grown person who's weeping over the peril of imaginary children. We live in a world in which there are real children who could use the help of a successful recording artist.
Yeah, they could use your tears. They could put the tears in a little jar and sell them.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, spend those tears somewhere else, player. Like, they're not, you're not getting it, like any bang for your buck, like wasting them on like the imaginary children, like from the underground tunnels. You know what I mean? It's like, why not focus? This is what's so fucking. It breaks my brain still. Like, Travis, you said it. Like, there are children that are in serious need of help in this world. Even children that are being trafficked, that is a real thing. But this idea to choose the version of that story that there's no real evidence for, and B, does the least amount of help for these people, like, is just baffling to me. Like, if you're a fucking famous celebrity, you're no doubt hounded by people who are like, oh, would you like to donate to this charity? And here's what we do with this charity. And for some reason, that's not good enough.
It's because the esoteric knowledge is the point. The idea that you know something that is secret and hidden.
Yes.
That is the actual reality beneath, this veil of perception and lies. That's what is the attraction. Like, of course they're not going to go for something that doesn't involve
because
any special knowledge.
Any old Travis View could, donate to charities or organizations that help children who have been trafficked or
he doesn't care about that.
Who are in need of any kind of assistance, but only R&B star Xavier can weep over the secret children that people tell him is a conspiracy theory, and nobody will help them.
Don't cry, Mr. Naidoo.
In Germany, they don't call it an adrenochrome farm. They call it a Kinderclinton. And I think that's beautiful.
I don't know.
What?
I don't know if that's true. It just has Clinton in it.
A Kinder Clinton, from the Latin root kindergarten.
That just means child Clinton.
Yeah, child Clinton.
Be careful, children, or the child Clinton will get you when you sleep if you behave badly. The child Clinton.
Oh my goodness.
Boys, we've invented
What a
a new
mess.
cryptid.
Now, the lockdown measures intended to control the pandemic in Germany were generally stricter than what happened in the U.S. There was initially a prohibition for restaurateurs to not provide any in-house dining. Service providers in close contact professions such as hairdressers, makeup artists, and massage and tattoo providers were all required to close. In response to these lockdown measures, protest movements sprang up. The most notable of these is the Querdenken movement, or the lateral thinking movement. The main Querdenken group is called Querdenken 711. The 711 is the telephone area code for Stuttgart, Germany, where this particular group is based. Now, there are other Querdenken organizations in other cities that have different numbers. The group claims to be fighting for the German constitution, which they say has been violated by these efforts to contain the pandemic. Now, on the surface, that sounds, like a reasonable complaint, but a little digging reveals that in their documents, their literature, they're really animated by a lot of conspiratorial nonsense, such as the belief that the coronavirus pandemic was artificially generated as part of a plot to force vaccines on people. Querdenken 711 is led by a man named Michael Ballweg. In early August, he seemed to appeal directly to QAnon by including "Where we go one, we go all" in a speech of his.
Ja, where we go one, we go all, meine eigene Interpretation. Wenn wir uns vereinen, dann entsteht eine Kraft, die unaufhaltbar ist.
Not a good thing to hear in the middle of a German speech I don't understand.
Yeah, but at least they've got a sign interpreter so that it's more accessible to more people.
That's very thoughtful.
My God. Wait, so that sign person had to do...
Where we go one, we go all.
Michael Ballweg also at times made direct appeals to Donald Trump in English.
Dear Mr. President, unfortunately, the German government ignores the people. As the only American president who has not started a war, we hereby cordially invite you to speak on the subject of peace on August 29th, 2020.
Now, claiming that Donald Trump is the only president to not wage war is Jimmy Carter erasure, I would argue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and also, I mean, at this point, we don't consider any of our tactical deployments military war. We just, everything is completely kind of segmented, and we have troops in multiple countries.
Listen, occupation isn't war.
Yeah, it's a conflict. It's a conflict. It's not a war. It's different.
Yeah, you just don't have to ask Congress anymore. That's the main thing. You don't have to bother with those fucking losers.
So Donald Trump did not show up to that August 29th, 2020 demonstration. And, good thing for him, possibly, because things got out of hand in an incident that seemed to foreshadow the events of January 6th in D.C. In Berlin, an estimated 38,000 people marched for this protest. Protesters brandished signs reading, "Take off the slave masks," while others held up peace flags. Police asked the crowd to maintain social distance and then at least wear masks. These calls were unsurprisingly not heeded. After this, police asked the crowd to disperse, and then after this, a minority of the protesters, a few hundred estimated, started causing trouble. There was a violent scene outside of the Russian embassy in Berlin where people threw bottles and they started chanting support for Vladimir Putin. About 200 of these people were arrested, including our vegan cook/neo-Nazi Attila Hildmann. The other incident was when a group of protesters broke through a barrier and made it onto the steps of the Reichstag, which is the German parliament. They nearly breached the Reichstag when they were being held back by just 3 police officers, but then backup came and then where it was able to make them disperse without, major incident. Now, through 2020 and 2021, QAnon slogans and symbols were regular features of these anti-lockdown protests. You could see people holding up signs, wearing Q t-shirts. It was just sort of like integrated into the protest anti-lockdown sort of movement. However, in late 2020, Michael Ballweg called on supporters to pause protests until the spring. The announcement happened to coincide with press reports that questioned the group's finances. German media reported that he was making a profit from Querdenken merchandise, charging people for appearances with him and asking supporters to donate to what was said was the movement's bank account, even though it was his own personal bank account. And I gotta say, I was
Awesome.
hearing this story, I was reading about the story, and how quaint it is that, like, I guess a far-right protest movement organizer could be profiting from this movement and then it be reported on and then cause this person to back off a little bit. That's insane. I mean, it was recently reported from the Huffington Post that Alex Jones made $165 million over the course of 3 years. It's kind of assumed and expected that if you're leading these kinds of conspiracist movements, you're wetting your beak a little. You're taking a little something for yourself. It's like it's part of the process. But apparently it was, it was a shameful scandal in Germany.
I'm sorry that there are all nations morally superior to America.
All right. In Germany, like in the U.S., the pandemic and prevention measures continue to be fuel for extremist ideology and even violence. In September 2020, a German man murdered a gas station cashier after being asked to wear a mask. It was later discovered that the murderer was active in online far-right conspiracy chats. Last December, a German man killed his entire family and himself after being caught with a fake vaccination card. It was revealed that he was active in Telegram chats of the anti-lockdown scene. Also in December, German police arrested people who plotted the murder of the governor of the German state of Saxony due to vaccine requirements. So that's all horrible stuff. That's basically a story of QAnon in Germany. It was this fringe thing that only a handful of weirdos cared about, but then it was inflamed by the chaos caused by the pandemic, far-right groups who wanted to piggyback on QAnon's message, and celebrities who were entering the twilight of their career, which, is kind of like the story of QAnon here in the U.S. But in Germany, we're still doing worse in terms of like the growth of the extremist ideology. Like their far right party, the AfD, gets like polls at like around like 10%, and they're like a minority party. And like their big scary democracy threatening sort of event was a bunch of protesters almost breaching a government building. So, obviously it's bad. It's QAnon in Germany is troubling, but, I can't say that Americans have any room to judge where they're at, extremism wise.
Yeah, very familiar story.
Yeah, it's all incredibly recognizable.
We are joined now by Miro Dittrich. He is a German far-right researcher and founder of the organization CEMAS. Miro, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, you have been studying these movements in Germany for a long time now. And as we came to understand, you can't really understand QAnon in Germany without first understanding the kind of existing extremist movements in Germany. And first of all, I want to talk about AfD, which is the Alternative for Germany, the far-right party. So it's my understanding that a decade ago, this party was essentially had no representation in the federal parliament. But that changed in recent years. And now they're basically the major opposition party. So how did that happen?
So for the longest time in Germany, the stigma of Nazi Germany helped us to sort of step away far-right politicians from getting into parliament. As we've seen far-right parties grow in size and all over Europe, it took Germany a longer time. And I think beginning with the so-called refugee crisis that we had in Europe, where a lot of refugees came to Germany, this was the moment the far-right could seize on sort of a more general fear, finally for them made them into parliament. But if we look at surveys in Germany, it's not like there weren't any far-right beliefs. It was just a bit taboo to vote for a party that's so openly far-right.
That's kind of like the electoral wing of the far right. But we also talked in this episode about the Reichsbürger movement, which they're often described as like the German sovereign citizens. And they have some really bizarre, far out conspiratorial beliefs about the German government. So where did they come from, and what is their sort of like core belief systems?
Yeah, we have several versions of sovereign citizenship in Germany. The Reichsbürger are sort of the German specialty of sovereign citizenship. They believe that the German Reich is still in existence and that Germany is not a sovereign country. And we see that from the beginning of the pandemic, is sort of the growth of QAnon in Germany and sovereign citizens' belief were pretty close hand in hand with each other.
Yeah, the pandemic seemed to like inflame a lot of these extremist conspiracist movements. And one of them was the protest movement called the Querdenken. How do you pronounce that?
Querdenken.
Okay. Yeah. So the leader of apparently Querdenken 711, Michael Bauweg, he openly used a QAnon slogan in English during a protest in August of 2020. So how did this movement form, and why did they seem to like graft right onto QAnon?
There were several movements in Germany who resisted the measurements against the pandemic. One of the most successful was Querdenken. They started in the south of Germany, and they were quite quickly really professional in their setups. They rallied huge marches, especially in Berlin. And they sort of presented a more normal view on the outside of the movement against the COVID measurements. But if you looked at them more closely, you've seen them talking with far-right individuals, and you see them flirting with sovereign citizen talks. So when he said, where we go one, we go all on stage, it was clearly a flirting with the QAnon community.
You know, it's my understanding that also at these protest movements, you can regularly see like QAnon signs and QAnon shirts, QAnon merchandise. Like, even though these aren't specifically, these are supposed to be like anti-lockdown protests or anti sort of pandemic measurement protests, but QAnon seems to be integrated into that movement.
Yeah, so for the history of QAnon in Germany, it wasn't never really an issue before the pandemic. With the Yellow Vest, we saw some people on the streets with QAnon signs, but it never grew as a big movement. And only with the beginning of the pandemic, it quite exploded. Before the pandemic, the biggest QAnon channel in Germany had 20,000 subscribers. And within weeks of the pandemic, it grew to 40,000, 80,000. And now it sits at 140,000 subscribers. So the movement against restrictions in Germany is quite linked with the QAnon movement. Without this pandemic, we wouldn't see such a big rise in the QAnon movement. So it's clear that they are a big part of these marches. After January 20th, it was clear that this brand of QAnon is not that helpful. A lot of people stopped using it, but we still see it quite alive in Germany today. If you, for example, look at a Telegram channel that just started in the beginning of 2021, it had 0 subscribers but gained over 120,000 subscribers just in 2021. So it's not over here, but most people don't want to associate with it that public anymore.
In this episode, we also talked a bit about an early QAnon promoter named Oliver Janik, who is apparently a former financial journalist who was one of the first sort of major people to promote QAnon, who apparently lives in the Philippines and vlogs, does a lot of like promoting extremism views. So, I mean, what is this guy's story? Why is he causing problems in Germany?
So he's a libertarian. He founded a libertarian party. And even when he was a financial writer, he already talked about 9/11 conspiracies. So it was always something close to him. And once again, with the so-called refugee crisis in Europe, he started to have more racist views and find an audience. He was an early adapter of Telegram. Before the pandemic, he had the biggest channel there with like 40,000 subscribers. But he always was in this global conspiracy. He made it a quite successful business. He sells several books. He sells special access to a secret Telegram channel that you have to pay to. So he was always driven by conspiracy ideas. And what's maybe interesting on Oliver Janik is that he started promoting QAnon in November 2017. So he was really early on it, but after January 20th of last year, he sort of started distancing himself from this idea. And recently he realized that as a libertarian, it doesn't really make sense to believe in QAnon because there can't be a just ruler. So it's a bit strange if he was one of the core promoters of popularizing this in Germany to now see that it's actually not that sensible in his ideology.
Yeah, it doesn't fit into the grift.
Yeah, and he's also one of the more worse example to see that Telegram just doesn't do any moderation. His account there has 170,000 subscribers, and he regularly calls for violence there. When January 6th was happening, he talked about you have to bring the ropes, you have to hang the traitors, otherwise the rats will always come back if you don't kill them. And it's quite a regular thing, this sort of language, and Telegram just doesn't do anything against it.
Quick question. What before QAnon and before it sort of gained popularity in Germany, what were the predominant conspiracy theories that sort of, circled around the message boards and other places that people could find conspiratorial content?
I think 9/11 was definitely a start for many people in Germany as in the US. In the far right, the idea of the Great Replacement was definitely the dominant one, I think. Other than that, it's just the world conspiracy of an elite that's trying to hurt Germans, the press not being free. So the basic usual stuff.
Right.
I had some questions about the origins of conspiracy theories and QAnon and the kind of crossover we've seen with the New Age, because, German New Medicine is something that I hear come up in these circles a lot. And if I understand correctly, some of the influencers and some of the people who got into this came to it through, either naturopathy or other kind of alternative medicine, systems. There was even mention of a Buddhist center where people were trading these kinds of ideas. And so that is the kind of thing that we've seen in the U.S. But could you tell us a bit more about, how that and maybe theosophy, exists in Germany?
We definitely, especially in the South, we have a stronger anthroposophy scene. And that's sort of the split that we see in Germany in the marches against the measurements, that in the South, it's more from an esoteric side, more of more from this side. And in the East, it's more from a far right side. And we definitely, if we look at Europe, Germany has one of the smallest vaccinations rate. So often it's linked to sort of this belief in more natural healing and more an alternative medicine. And we definitely see this, that in the South, there are more protests.
Yeah, apparently, in terms of people abandoning QAnon, apparently this was also the trajectory of Attila Hildmann, who was Turkish German vegan chef turned QAnon promoter turned far right, eventually abandoned QAnon. Apparently, he got in some trouble for his participation in the events of August 29th, 2020. So what exactly happened there? Why did he wind up fleeing the country?
Attila Hildmann has a lot of problems with the law. He had several posts on Telegram that quite clearly broke the law. So he fled the country before an arrest warrant was issued. He actually was warned from someone inside the police that an arrest warrant was out for him, but he already left the country. So for him, it's legal problems why he left the country. And it's also a sign of during these radicalization on this calls for violence on Telegram, there's a lot of measurements being discussed in Germany, like you have to have a clear name on Telegram. Attila Hildmann is a clear example. He had his clear name. It was clear who wrote these things, but the state took so long to prosecute any of this and let him flee the country. So I don't think having an identified user would help.
So there was a mole inside the police that told him that basically the law was coming for him, which gave him enough time to flee the country.
He left the country before this information anyway, but
okay.
Anonymous, there are some people in Germany who really don't like him, who's leaked a lot of his personal information. So That's where we know that he got warned.
Terrible. Could you imagine police being sympathetic to the far right? So one thing I want to talk about is that it seems like there's quite a trend of people in the German far right who out and out flee the country. We talked a bit about there's apparently a colony in Paraguay of ex-Germans who want to start a new life. What exactly is that about? Is this idea of people who would simply emigrate out rather than continuing to live in Germany? That's not something we see a lot in the American far right, I have to say.
In Germany, it's quite common. At the moment, we have people living in the Philippines, in Canada, in Florida, several African countries, and in Eastern Europe countries. These are people who usually have problem with the law. Either they have to pay fines or they sort of flee the COVID restrictions that we have here. Some proclaim that they don't want to get vaccinated, and that's the reason a lot of the countries they flee to now have the same rules that we have in Germany. So it's not that effective, but yeah, it's quite a trend of these patriots to leave the country, but still mobilizing their followers to do illegal demonstrations here and break the law.
So as a consequence of, I guess, QAnon falling out of favor, would it be fair to say that like the sort of like QAnon sort of ideology is kind of like shrinking down or dying, or it's just not as much of a problem or a threat in Germany as it was before?
So if you look at the people who promoted QAnon for the longest time during the start of the pandemic, in the growth, a lot of them stopped promoting it. And a lot of the specialized channels who only post QAnon content have shrunken. But like I said, there are still channels who were created last year who within a year managed to get 120,000 subscribers. So there's still a force in Germany of people who believe in this. I think the effect that we've seen I think with a lot of these movements is that in the beginning they're quite effective in spreading their narratives and the brand is attractive, so a lot of these far-right and conspiracy influencers promote it. But if the brand is not in favor anymore and they don't use the label QAnon, but the narratives and the talking points that they imported are still quite prevalent here. It's not that people think, oh yeah, there's this Q guy and he knows the truth and Trump is going to be our savior. But ideas of Satanism, ideas of child sex slaves, of sort of this world conspiracy is definitely still quite active here. And I think in this is sort of from the outside of the US, QAnon, in my opinion, has a really strong effect in globalizing the far right, because the far right quite easily can influence QAnon in the US with far right narratives. And in Germany, people translate the narratives from QAnon on the same day. And we have a lot of far-right people in QAnon spaces. So it's quite easy for far-right narratives from the US to travel to a wider audience. And if you look at this, that was way more effective than people who try to import the ideas of the alt-right. Yeah, it's definitely quite absurd how often they just import these narratives. For example, the narrative about voter fraud was during the last elections, the far right tried to push the narrative as they've seen that it was quite successful in the US. But QAnon sort of just copied it a little bit too close to the original and claiming that Dominion voting machines are used in Germany to change elections. We, of course, don't have Dominion voting machines because we don't have voting machines in general. So it's quite absurd to see these people just copying the ideas that they've seen in the US Telegram channel and think that's how the world works.
Now, before we let you go, we also got to ask you about Xavier Nadu, because apparently we have a problem in the U.S. in which celebrities promote far right narratives, including QAnon. Apparently, you have an R&B singer who says who basically goes to sovereign citizen meetings and spreads anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. So, what is his story?
Yeah, he's one of the more famous pop singer in Germany. An expert for the longest time talked about how his connection to the sovereign citizen movement is quite clear, but this always got denied. He even sued someone who told about him that he was an anti-Semite. And the person who claimed this lost in 2 courts, but now finally the 3rd court allowed it. He got fired from sort of our version of Pop Idol. He was a juror there because he released a video where he was crying because he was so happy that children were being rescued, and he was talking about adrenochrome. And the reason for this video was in the beginning of the pandemic in New York, when in Central Park the tents were being erected. And so he thought this was the example of the mole children being rescued, and this made him cry. And Oliver Yannick uploaded it to YouTube. It got 500,000 views there. So it really helped the spread of these QAnon talking points in Germany. So from the beginning, the sovereign citizen movement and QAnon grew quite close together. And we even got sort of a split from the main QAnon cult. It's called SHAF. It stands for Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Forces. It was sort of at the end of the war, how the Allied forces coordinated their strikes in Europe. It was disbanded 2 months after Germany gave up the war. But these people believe that SHAF is still in power, that's still a military rule, and that's the way they can link Trump to Germany. Because the commander of SHAF is the commander of the United States, so it would be Donald Trump. And it's sort of their sect of combining QAnon talking points and sovereign citizen talking points. and they're actually quite concerning. We have several people claim they are commander of this force, and one of them was recently arrested because he regularly issued death warrants for his political enemies that should be hanged or should be killed. And these are people who are really lost in this world and think that because Germany is still under military law, it's allowed to have a death sentence, and calls for violence are quite prevalent in this community. And this also shows how effective this can be in permitting getting around the bans on social media, because you can find a lot of these chef claims with the hashtag chef, who are basically just QAnon mixed with Sovereign Citizen, and these posts so far don't get deleted and spread there quite widely.
Yeah, they're quite good at figuring out how to modify the content so as to not get scooped up in any sort of bans or censorship or anything like that.
Oh, and you also have the storming of the Reichstag as a question, which I think is quite relevant, as maybe the kicker of the story is not that known in the US.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, one of the, I guess, inflammatory events that was perpetuated by this sort of anti-lockdown protest movement involved an August 2020 incident in which a few hundred supporters, apparently, of this movement broke off from the main crowd and made it to the steps of the Reichstag, nearly broke through. So what exactly went down with that particular incident?
When he saw the footage live of the Capitol on January 6th getting stormed, of course, these images came to mind for us. Quite some comparisons that you can make. I think in both cases, it was clear that something was going to happen. In the German case, there was a Telegram group called Storming of the Reichstag. And it was quite openly a plan for the long time for this movement to sort of break through here. But there was a lot of demonstrations that day, and so the police took all their forces to somewhere else, and was only guarded by 3 officers in the end. And direction in Germany was not compared to what the FBI is doing in the US right now. Of course, no one died, and they didn't actually get in. But of course, for them, it was a really important event. They were on the steps with their flags and with their QAnon signs. And I've seen these pictures shared even in US far-right channels quite often. And the sort of absurd story, as these things often have, is that the moment that led to the storming was a QAnon believer going on stage and proclaiming that Donald Trump just landed in Berlin to support the movement to free Germany, and that's why they have to show support and storm the building. Of course, this was in the time where Donald Trump had better things to do than come to Germany to free the people here. But it was actually the belief in QAnon and a QAnon believer who started this action.
Yeah, there's a couple interesting sort of QAnon narratives that have worked in Germany. One was that that there was a group of special forces that raided a server farm in Germany, and of course that server farm was alleged to have all of the proof needed to prove election fraud, and obviously the entire thing was made up. But it is interesting how these two countries do sort of work each other into their narratives, maybe more so than other foreign countries. Is that right? I mean, I feel like I've heard more about Germany,
definitely,
like in regards to sort of made up QAnon narratives than I have, especially, the Angela Merkel being Adolf Hitler's daughter and all of this stuff. There was also, Travis was telling us in the episode that a group of QAnon supporters also gathered outside the Russian embassy and that they were proclaiming their approval of Vladimir Putin. What do you think that's all about?
Yeah, this was at the same time where the tried storming of the Reichstag in Germany. They were in the front of the Russian embassy and the embassy of the United States. Funnily, the embassy of the United States tweeted at the time about how vaccination is a good thing. I think it was sort of trolling them, if you were to read between the lines. But in Germany, in the far right and in the conspiracy world, Russia is seen sort of the strongman who's here to save us. It's the evil West against this good liberator of the people. So they think that either Trump or Putin are the people who will save them. I think that's sort of an interesting analysis of the German movement, especially that QAnon got so popular here that they think the only way to get out of their problems is sort of a foreign strongman who will save them with this magical day of the storm. So I think it quite clearly shows that they don't think they are able to do it on their own. And to the storming of the server farm, a colleague of mine, Josef Hollenberger, actually tracked that story down to a German guy starting it with just an absurd post that he made that sort of permutated through the internet until it reached the US. And I think that shows that with Germany being the biggest non-English speaking QAnon community, that of course we get influenced a lot of your talking points, but sometimes talking points from Germany also travel back the way. And I think Germany being the biggest non-English speaking QAnon group, you can see when our biggest channels used to have 170,000 subscribers, groups with 60,000 subscribers on Telegram, when Ghost Ezra has like 300,000. So it's half of the biggest international QAnon account. So I think that speaks for a huge audience for this content that we have here.
I wonder if there's any connection between sort of the end of World War II, where you had, the Americans and the Russians working together to liberate concentration camps and sort of, bring about the defeat of the Nazis. If there's any of that emotion left over and sort of allows a conspiracy theorist to kind of believe the story that, the Americans and Russians will save us again, even though this time it's from an imaginary enemy as opposed to a very real one.
What we definitely see is that sort of this idea of living in fascist Germany is quite clear with them. We see a lot of talks about, they dream about Nuremberg 2.0, and they want to do the Nuremberg trials again, which led to the hanging of the people who were convicted. And so it's just now the people they think are responsible for the pandemic are the people who should get hung up there. Sort of this dream of a justice day, like the stream of the storm is here with clear allegations of the Third Reich.
Fascinating.
I just wanted to check in with you on that secret space program claim that part of the Nazis were good and went to space because they signed a treaty with the Draco reptilians. Yeah, as a specialist, obviously, I just wanted to run it by you.
I don't think the Nazis would have used this technology.
Okay, clear. So, all right, yeah.
There it is. There you have it, Julian.
If Hitler had found a way to exterminate more people, he would have done it. He wouldn't have escaped.
All right. Miro, thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise. Where could people go to learn more about your work?
You can go to the website of our organization, CEMAS.io, or you can just follow me on Twitter at Dittrich Miro.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Miro.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the QAnon Anonymous podcast. Please go to patreon.com/QAnon Anonymous and subscribe for $5 a month. You can get a whole second episode every week, plus access to our entire archive of premium episodes. When you subscribe, you help us stay advertising free and editorially independent. And for everything else, we have a website, QAnonAnonymous.com.
Bis nächste Woche, Zuhörer. Mögen die Tiefen der Auflaufform dich segnen und bewahren.
It's not a conspiracy, it's fact.
And now, today's auto cue.
Sie nennen uns Nazis. Sie rufen uns Pack. Wir wollen die Wahrheit. Sie schüren den Hass. Wir werden Verräter, Verschwörer und Lügner genannt. Verfolgt, überwacht, bestraft, zensiert und gebannt. Sie vernichten Glauben, Traditionen. Sie zerstören die Welt. Sie sind der Dieb, die Kabale. Der Teufel, das Geld, es zählt weder Gott oder Rücksicht, noch die Ehre, das Wort, für sie zählt nur Korruption, Betrug, Raub und Mord, sie brechen Gesetze, sie kaufen sich Krieg, betrachten den feigen Mord, ganzer Völker als Sieg, sie stoßen mit Kindern, ganz kleinen und Adrenochrome, Champagner und Blut an, auf die Perversion. perverse Toten, perfide Pläne des skrupellosesten Hochfinanz führen Lobby gelenkt, die Welt in Schrecken und Angst, dazu ihr Mainstream formender Mediendreck, wäscht die Sklavengehirne und pflastert den Weg schon in der Kita ganz früh bis hin zur Akademie wird politisch korrekt die Lüge indoktriniert mit Gift und Drogen, Impfung und Zuckerbrot. Folgt der Gutmensch der Schattenregierung bis in den Tod. Sie vergiften Freundschaft, Familie und jede Kultur, ganze Völker und Landstriche. Und das nur, um noch reicher zu werden an Geld und an Macht. Dafür werden Nationen zu ihren Sklaven gemacht.